really honored and pleased to have you with us.
I'm thrilled to do it, Dan.
Great.
Very thrilled to do it. Sorry, I saw Dan Matthews on there. I was texting him about something else, so forgive me, Greg. It's a pleasure to be back. Thank you.
That's great. First of all, I wanted to thank you for being here. I also wanted to thank everybody who's joined us. Although this was a free event to everybody, we did ask folks who registered if they wanted to make a donation to the toy drive for needy kids in Newton. And between this and another effort we did, we raised about $1,000 for that. So thanks to all of you who supported that. There's a lot of kids obviously in need, even in a community like Newton. So thank you for that. And Congressman, there's so much for us to talk about. Want to talk about how you feel about leaving. Want to get your take on some of the kind of unfinished business that's before Congress this week. But I wanted to start just by thanking you for always being there for us, for the chamber, and really for the businesses during these 8 years, because there are plenty of times when you could have easily been distracted by larger things and brighter spotlights, but we appreciate that you and your team were always there for us. So thank you for that.
Greg, listen, it was an absolute pleasure and an honor for me, and I think to everybody that's joined us so far this afternoon, an extraordinary honor of my life to be able to represent you and try to be the voice for our constituents down in Washington and across our district, nationally as well. There's an awful lot of this job I will miss. There's some parts I will miss a little bit less than other parts of the job, perhaps. But Greg, I mean, look, we did business walks together. We've done a whole bunch of roundtables. You've been an extraordinary voice and force for Needham. And look, when we had started this, when I started my time here, my first campaign, nearly 9 years ago, this chamber was in a very different place. The Needham corridor was in a very different place. If you kind of take a step back and think of what has happened and transpired over the course of the past 8 years in this region, it is extraordinary. And I think highlighting the need for strong local participation, local voices, this locally led and locally oriented growth, to make sure that voices are from the local communities are contained in that have that their input is going to be taken into account, and the chamber's done an incredible job of that as being a vector for that information back up to me and to other policymakers. And so a huge thank you right back. I'm not exactly sure what the future has entailed for me, but look forward to keeping in touch. And if there's obviously any way I can be helpful to you or any of your members going forward, please let me know.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And let's get to all those things in the next hour or so. And I want to start. So you mentioned here there was an honor, and you gave your farewell address on the House floor. Was it Tuesday? Where you basically
yeah, Wednesday.
Okay. You said this job has been an honor, that you're proud and hopeful. So I can understand why you would say it's a great honor, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but isn't it a little embarrassing too? I mean, you work in a place where 105 of your colleagues are challenging the election results. They won't even acknowledge who the president-elect is. How do you kind of reckon that? And that's something you've lived with for all these years.
Yeah, look, it's hard, right? There's parts of this job that are hard. And as I said, the job is an honor. Representing my constituents and the voices of the 4th District in office is an honor. I said there's parts of this job I'll miss less than others. I think every job to some extent requires a level of some semblance of ability to compartmentalize and to try to figure out how you're just going to move your way through. And what I think is hard for people to understand about this one, and hard for anybody that probably isn't in this job on a day-to-day basis, is to see some of the names on that list of 105, 106 folks that are challenging the results of an election through an absolutely patently absurd legal case. To asking other states to throw out their election results that have been counted and recounted and certified over and over again. While at the same time recognizing that you're part of a body of 435 and that you need consensus to build forward, to move forward, and that there's big challenges out there across our country, and that if there's a way that you can get folks to come together to solve those challenges, that's what your job also is. And so of the 105, 106 folks on that list, I've worked with many of them, if not most of them, on a whole swath of different issues. And you have to be able to compartmentalize to some extent that we can work on, whether it's literally issues on mental health care or maternal mortality or issues on access to justice and legal services. But we're going to stand up and fight back and disagree vehemently on the constitutionality of the Affordable Care Act. And are there actions and steps or things that some of my colleagues have engaged in that I find degrading to our democracy, our institution, and the House of Representatives? Yeah, absolutely. Can I do anything about that other than speak out about it? Not much, but I'll speak out about it and I'll try to comport myself with the dignity that I think you all deserve and that the job requires and that it merits. And I'd like to think I've done that.
So, and you've worked with these men and women, these 106 women and men and women, and there have been like times you say, what the heck? You know, what do you really, do they mean it? What do they say off the record? You know,
almost every day. You say, what the heck? It's not always heck, but,
right.
You know, a different word. It depends on the person, right? Some of them mean it. Some of them kind of throw their hands up and say, you know, what do you want us to do? And some of that, I think it's easy for me to project that as kind of, you know, very self-serving. And to an extent, I think obviously that behavior it can be rationalized away a bit by saying, look, some Republicans have to pick their battles because if they speak out too often, they end up in the ire of the president, and the president would target them and they lose. And if they lose, the person that wins is going to be an acolyte of the president. And so you actually haven't, standing up and speaking out doesn't, in their minds, always lead to a better outcome. And I've seen that. And so I can understand that rationale. I think the hard part for me is actually understanding the kind of hierarchy of issues by which some of my Republican colleagues say, hey, you know what? It is worth us standing up and presenting a unified front against the president's war on and use of tariffs, because we believe that is going to be absolutely devastating to parts of our economy. But we are going to completely let slide his attacks on the fundamental value of our democracy. We can debate whether the war on tariffs, his use of tariffs has been beneficial or not, and a smart move of policy or not. I don't think anybody can realistically debate whether as you described, what the actions that he's engaged in, certainly since the election, is actually strengthening our country or an embarrassment to it. But you've got...
So over 8 years, you've managed to remain optimistic, or I mean, be pragmatic, but optimistic too. And you were optimistic in your final speech there on the floor. How do you kind of transfer that to those young interns that come work for you, or new young staff members or volunteers who just have to be so kind of frustrated by when they sort of see the reality of what they might hope Congress might be, our country might be? How do you keep people motivated and optimistic?
So Greg, I think a couple of ways and things here, right? So one is taking a step back, and as I tried to articulate in that speech, remember where we were, right? When our nation was founded, we declared that we, the people, were creating a nation to have a government that secured life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We, the people, meant rich, white, Protestant men, and that's it. If you're anything other than those four characteristics, you didn't count. And life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness included human bondage, slavery, and enormous affronts to human dignity. And it is impossible to deny the fact that over time, our country has gotten stronger, fairer, more equitable, and I think better. So one is taking a zooming out and recognizing that this journey that we are on is a journey, and it is a long arc. It does, I think, bend the right way, but it only bends because people go up there and actually force it to bend, to paraphrase Martin Luther King. So don't lose sight of the fact that this is a long, hard struggle to get to a more perfect, we said more, didn't say perfect, but a more perfect place. One. Two, so much of the spotlight, as you've referred to, at least so far, about what happens in Congress is focused on what happens out of Washington. And I think that's on the one hand true. What gets lost in that conversation is the fact that for most members of Congress, for most members of the House, Washington is actually almost secondary to what happens in the district. Half of my staff, more than half of my time, was focused with you and with the folks on our Zoom today. So while it might be really hard I spent nearly 2 years getting the first big bill I had passed, and what it ultimately passed, not a single member of the House voted against it, right? So look at that either way. One, if you actually engage in the policy fight the right way, you can get, as a member of the minority party, I could get Republicans on board, but it took 2 years to actually get a bill passed that nobody voted against. The flip side is, in that first term, on my first days, I was able to question the head of a Fortune 100 company about the impacts of a company that they had purchased a long time ago in Attleboro, Massachusetts, that had gotten a whole bunch of local residents there sick because of the substances that were used in procuring weapons for the US military. And we were able to increase the benefits to those families, survivors and people that were still sick, by tens of millions of dollars, just by highlighting the issue, working with folks within the administration, and trying to link up people that deserve those benefits and the benefit administrators. And we were able to do stuff working that way without passing a bill or a law that helped dozens and dozens of people in big and meaningful ways. And so I can tell you a whole bunch of different stories like that about the way in which your focus on your constituent services will meaningfully impact the trajectory of an individual, a family, a business, a community, literally for a long time, because of the work that we do. And it doesn't all get kind of mired in the grind that is Washington, D.C., but you can focus on the benefits you're accruing for your constituents and people across the country.
So one more question about this sort of optimism and dysfunction. So you grew up in an environment where people have always speculated about your family, they've speculated about your privilege, they've speculated about what they think your sense of entitlement is. Who helped you? How did you keep your cynicism in check?
Look, I think it's a great question. I think, Greg, growing up as part of my family, it's a public family, and a lot of people have opinions about it. Most of the time, at least here, those opinions are good. Not always, and that's certainly not the case for everybody. But I think being part of my family, that's something that's a reality that you have to confront. There's nothing you're going to do to change that. It's just what you have to learn to deal with it. And you have to learn to accept the fact that, well, you can't necessarily change what somebody's going to think of you. You can change on the thing that you can control is how you respond to it, how you react to it, and whether you're going to lead your life dictated by those responses or do the best you can with the privilege that you have. And my family, both sides, my mother's side and my father's side, have been, I think, set for me and my brother at a young age, the acknowledgement that we have been extremely privileged, but that with that privilege comes an opportunity to do what you can with that to address some of the structural inequities there that inhibit others from enjoying those same benefits. And I've tried to dedicate myself to that, whether that's been as a Peace Corps volunteer, legal aid volunteer, lawyer, and now a member of Congress. And as I try to figure out what comes next, that's kind of the part that I'm wrestling with, is how can you channel the experiences and the values that I have, the professional experience that I have, and translate that to this next chapter. How do I add, some value and contribute to those causes or to those organizations or institutions going forward with a different platform and different opportunities that are both perhaps more limited, but also in some far more liberating.
So is there a person, a mentor, a group of people that really kind of shaped the way you've been able to kind of look at the world and think about this?
So I think a number of different things there, Greg. One, family. So my parents, my grandmother, who has, I think, seen an awful lot of extremes over the course of her life, but who always finds a way to smile and laugh through it. For me, without question, one of the most formative professional experience I had was as a Peace Corps volunteer, where if you're living in a community that has intermittent electricity, intermittent running water, and where life expectancy is an awful lot shorter than what you're accustomed to here in the United States, and yet you still see folks that will take half of their plate and put it on yours, and people that would care for you when you were sick and look out after you when you weren't well. But knowing that there was nothing that any one of those individuals could do that would enable them to enjoy just the privileges and structures that people enjoy in this country because of where they were born. And if you realize that and you say, well, that's not right, and then you try to find your way to fix it, to change it. And so, whether it's my personal experiences, kind of friends and colleagues, some of the experiences that I've had, again, personally and professionally, I think after you see it and you've been exposed to it and people that you care an awful lot about are on the other side of it, it's hard to sit there and say, well, that's just okay. And you're going to act like it doesn't happen.
And explain what you meant when you said on the House floor Wednesday about the great lie of our times.
I think one of the narratives that I think a Trump administration has continued to try to solidify in this moment in our country is that the amount of success that our country has is essentially fixed, that we've peaked as a nation, and that we in fact want to make America great, not greater, but again, that we're going to turn something back, clock, society, culture, whatever that is, back to the way things were. And that our future isn't in fact big and bold and bright, but our past was in fact the best that we could be. And I think that is in fact antithetical to our history and antithetical to what I believe this country is about, which is about taking on those big, bold challenges and finding a way through it. And a belief, more than anything, that pie is not fixed, that there's greater success that we as a nation can enjoy, but in order to enjoy it, that nation is a sum of the parts of all of us. And in fact, our nation is stronger when every single person, worker, family, employee has the ability to provide more, to gain more, to ensure the future success of their own families and their own loved ones. And that framing of the fact that the pie is fixed means that you are essentially fighting each other for scraps that fall from the system, rather than saying, hey, let's fight for the changes in the system that enable all of us to succeed. And I think that's been the kind of the overarching narrative of the Trump administration, that I just wholeheartedly believe our country we are better than that. And when we are at our best, we are willing to go out there and prove it. And I think that's kind of the test of this moment as to whether we're willing to take on some of those really hard challenges to fight for our own families and to fight for each other, knowing that for our country to succeed through some of these issues, you're going to have to be willing to fight for that family next to you. Have
you ever had a conversation with Donald Trump?
One.
Yeah, no.
One. One of the traditions that carries on in the House of Representatives is that every St. Patrick's Day, the Prime Minister, the Taoiseach of Ireland, is invited over and gets an Oval Office meeting with the President. And the Speaker of the House holds a brunch reception for the Prime Minister every year. And it's, interestingly enough, Greg, it's the only head of state where that honor is bestowed. And it goes back to a tradition started with Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill. This was, I guess, probably 3 years ago now. And the former Prime Minister of Ireland was there, Leo Varadkar, and I'd gone over to say hello. We'd met a couple times before. And it was Speaker Pelosi's, it's her brunch. So she's, you've got the prime minister on one hand and the president on the other, and the tables are tight together. And I was 3 inches from the president. And so I said, Mr. President, hi, nice to meet you. Joe Kennedy, and I said, I hope we can find some ways to work on some things together. And he went, oh, absolutely. Infrastructure. We need $1 trillion, $2 trillion. Absolutely, we'll get it done tomorrow. And they said, and immigration, we absolutely want to fix our immigration problems. We're going to solve immigration right away. Great. It was a brief conversation. It was kept relatively short. I think the results of both of those policy proposals by this administration, which is to say that there hasn't really been either one of them has made a serious policy proposal on either vector there. I do have a pretty good relationship with some Republicans still in the House, and I kind of went over to them and I said, so infrastructure and immigration, huh? And it was a bit of a eyebrow raise and a shake of the head, and that's kind of where it ended.
Well, at least he wasn't infected with COVID at the time. So you're
not at the time. Not at the time.
There you go. So, what I'd like to do actually is ask Tiffany and our team to bring in two people that I know you've had more conversations with and more productive conversations to join us right now. And as soon as we let them in the room, they wanted to say hello to you. We have Mayor Fuller, Newton Mayor Fuller, and Mo Handel, who's chair of the Needham Select Board. And they both wanted the opportunity just to come on and say hello and thank you for your service. Mayor, you want to go first?
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, Mo. Congressman, what a pleasure to say hello and a bittersweet goodbye. Although I know I'll be working with you on lots of other things in the years ahead, and I suspect you'll have lots of different roles to play as the years unfold. But I do want to say, first one, I think I was an alderman at the time, not even a city councilor. Our first breakfast at Johnny's, I believe, when you were just starting to run for Congress. And I've had the pleasure of coming to know you. And yes, Greg, working with him and talking to Joe along the way. You are a modest person, so this is probably painful for you. But I do want everyone to know what a listener and learner you are, how available and accessible you were all along the way, how effective and energetic you are, and stalwart and serious, but I think most importantly, compassionate and caring. And this word is no longer allowed to be used by most of us. The word great somehow has changed meaning. But you've not just been a good, but you've been a great congressperson for the 4th District as a whole, and certainly for here in Newton. You have my respect, you have my gratitude, and you have my affection. I can't thank you enough. And I really seriously look forward to continue to work with you in the years ahead.
I'm at a bit of a loss for words. We'll see if you say that for how long now that I am a private constituent or a private resident and a constituent of yours.
You can call me about your pothole anytime.
No potholes in the street. The snow has been removed and the trash gets picked up, so you can A+.
You're here.
So there you go.
Mayor, we do have 2 open city council seats right now.
Hey, you don't have to pull papers, I think, till January.
Oh, good.
I promise I'll endorse you.
I'll be sure to tell my wife it's exactly what I'm up to. Launching another campaign come January. It'll go over real well. Mayor, it has been you have been an incredible partner. And the congressman-elect is extremely lucky to have you at the helm of the city. But I think people on this forum would certainly appreciate the value of collaboration and coordination across levels of government. And you have been a consistent source of that conversation back and forth, and I'm grateful for it. So thank you, and thank you for the incredible words. It means an awful lot to me. Yeah, thank you.
And Mo, you're up.
Oh, good afternoon, Congressman and Mayor and Greg. Mayor Ruth Ann said it better than I could ever say it. You have been a superb congressman for us. And I was thrilled to be at your first reception at Denise Garlick's house in Needham many, many years ago when you were announcing for the race, and been with you in many venues and heard you speak. And I just heard your story about meeting our illustrious ex-president or president-to-be ex. So I just wanted to wish you well in the years ahead. Unlike Newton, we rotate the chairmanship of our board, which is functionally, I guess, the chief executive officer. But all of my colleagues know and respect you, and it's been a pleasure working with you, and I wish you well in the years ahead. And I'm sure we'll see you again in public office, and I'm looking forward to it.
My friend, again, thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the partnership. It has been, look, not every member, not every region has communities like Newton and Needham and organizations like the Chamber, but public servants like you guys that are not only accessible and willing to engage, but actually try to solve problems, which, believe me, not everybody does, I think, as you know. It has been an absolute privilege for me to be able to support your work and to try to elevate your voices in Washington. And that part I will truly miss. But thank you both. And if there's ever any way that you think I can be helpful, I ain't going far. So
don't worry, you'll hear from us.
I hope so.
Mayor Fuller and Chairman Select Board Handel, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you, and thanks for your work on all this. Great.
Great. Thank you. Congressman Jake Auchincloss, question about him. I know your team has been working together. Help us, tell me, what kind of advice did you give to him? What have you said to him, to Congressman-elect Auchincloss?
So I've tried to give him the advice that when he asked for it, I want to be clear with the Congressman-elect. He has, just as Congressman Barney Frank was to me, and I'm grateful for the way that he handled that transition, which obviously from a constituent level was extremely helpful and productive. And we assumed his office. The casework handover went about as smoothly as it could. I will tell you, there was a bunch of things sitting on the conference table there, which is still the same conference table, that I thought were little karaoke machines because they were like tape decks with a cord and a microphone, and there were dictaphones. I'd never seen a dictaphone before, but there's like 4 or 5 of them that were sitting on the table. And there was a couch in there from Father Drinan, which was not new and not in dire need of a change. But he was extremely helpful and respectful, helpful on questions that I had and advice to try to get things up and running and kind of a little bit of kind of where some landmines might be. But he was also clear about the fact that as a new member, you need to come in and put your own stamp on the office. There's going to be things that, we care about an awful lot of the same things. There's going to be different priorities that he puts on things, just like there were different priorities, issues that I highlighted over Congressman Frank. Chairman Frank, as you know, was one of his biggest issues was affordable housing. I was not going to be able to match Chairman Frank with his ability to deliver on affordable housing. He was the head of the committee that oversaw housing in Congress. I wasn't on that committee. I was on the committee that oversees healthcare, right? So there's different focuses that every member of Congress is going to have and that everybody's going to put on it. And So I want to be respectful of that. I'm happy to give him, and I have given him some advice when asked, and a couple of things that are perhaps unsolicited. But the main points there are, one, focus on your district, right? It's those folks that sent you there. It's those folks that are going to expect that you're going to be home. They want somebody that is accessible. It's a incredibly challenging and complex time. I think it has been for me, and I've had the honor of representing you guys for nearly a decade. But for a new member, where you can't run around and do a whole bunch of, whether they're town halls or, as we did, office hours, you can't do a bunch of constituent meetings. You got to do it all by Zoom. It's not the same when you're trying to build a relationship. That's going to be an added challenge for the congressman-elect. So I think, one, for everybody to give him a little bit of time and grace to be able to get your feet underneath you. Particularly given the challenges that we're in, but also recognizing that, like, you're coming in the middle of a crisis and folks need help and they need to be able to deliver. So I've given them some advice on how to, not who, but per se, but how to think about staffing, how to think about various roles there, and how you want to balance that staff out. But I also, as I said, want to make sure that he has the opportunity to put his stamp on this office the way that he is comfortable with and the way that he wants to do, without him thinking that there's somebody else either didn't follow that advice or going to be critical of him for it. I am a constituent of his now and wish him well. So
do you regret running against Ed Markey?
No, I don't. And look, I think for those of you that followed this, my campaign, I voiced some areas of disagreement, some of my the reasons why I got in that race, and but tried to be, and I think I largely was, very respectful of the senator throughout the entire race. I was proud to vote for Senator Markey in November. Supported the senator through the general election campaign. Did a couple of events with him even this week. And so, and the senator there was a little goodbye lunch that Chairman Richie Neal held for me down in Washington this week, and just with members of the delegation. And Senator Markey was extremely gracious to come by and wish me well there, and which I appreciated. So I respect the senator. We have some differences in terms of areas of focus and ideas. And look, I'm proud of the campaign I ran. I obviously wish the results were different, but Massachusetts is going to be well served with the senator there for the next 6 years. And I wish him well with it, and I wish him success.
So I want to remind folks, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A and we'll do our best to get to some of them. Let's talk about some of the unfinished business before Congress in your final days. When's your last day?
So the last day is so the next Congress gets sworn in on January 3rd. The last day, so that's the firm last day. The last day in Washington is a little bit TBD because of some of the questions that I think you're about to lead into here. So,
and the potential shenanigans regarding the Electoral College, that would be next week?
Yeah. There's, as you dive into the details here, Greg, there's a number of kind of procedural hurdles that folks have to get through here, right? In order to have the Electoral College, that vote actually done and certified by the House of Representatives, and et cetera. But the main one, so we're in that safe harbor period now. I think, as you and I both referenced before, the court case filed by Texas is by almost every stretch, I'd say unconscionable, but certainly without merit. We've seen a massive rejection of those cases by judges, including conservative judges, including judges that President Trump has appointed. So I don't think there's a whole lot of folks that think that this current case going up is going to have a whole lot of merit. But the main pieces here, that there's one piece that, well, there's several pieces that need to move. Government funding was supposed to expire today. We voted to move that till next Friday. It was a vote on Wednesday. I would say that's a must-pass bill. It's a must-pass bill. The government could shut down. I think that's highly unlikely. But negotiators needed a little bit more time, largely on some aspects of the policy there. But the bigger piece is kind of this concurrent COVID relief package. And just being down in Washington over the course of the past couple of days, I want to say almost unanimously, but it's not, but it's close. No one thinks that Congress can go home for the holidays without providing additional relief to American families, right? This crisis it's been going on for so long, but the cases are ramping up in almost every jurisdiction across this country. You watch the morning news on any news station, and it's devastating. As many of us know, and certainly, Mayor, I was haunted by the number of empty seats out in front of City Hall that I saw. I think it was over Thanksgiving, for the number of residents that of Newton that had passed from COVID. So this is something that has affected, I think, every family. We are essentially, the disagreement at this point extends over, one, assistance to states and municipalities, where Democrats have been trying to push that number up to provide some flexibility to folks like the mayor and the town council in Needham. Also to schools to provide some flexibility so that there's some ability to make ends meet here. Mitch McConnell has been adamant that there needs to be liability protections for companies. Democrats aren't saying wholeheartedly no to that, right? I think there does need to be, we understand that the need for some liability protection. What we don't want to say is, essentially there needs to be some level of due care adopted there as well, so that you can't just say, a business can say, hey, we're going to open up, we're not going to engage in any safety measures whatsoever, have all of your employees come back and have them then have to take the risk of losing their jobs because they're not going back, or getting COVID because of businesses and engaging in the practices to keep their employees safe, which might not be an issue here in Massachusetts. It's been an issue selectively, and as you know, in some of these industries across the country, particularly meat packing plants and others, right? So we're trying to get that part right, but that's essentially been the holdup on this.
So do you think we'll have a stimulus package? Are you optimistic? I mean, we just hear about talks breaking down and Mitch McConnell saying no to this and the other side saying no to that. Is it conceivable that we won't?
Greg, given my experience in the past couple of years, I certainly can't say anything is inconceivable anymore. I would have to believe, look, there has been significant progress that's been made on this. We Democrats have come down we passed the HEROES Act twice at roughly $3 trillion, or over $3 trillion. We're now talking about $950 billion, right? So we've come down an enormous amount. Republicans are kind of like, those numbers aren't the major disagreement at this point, right? It's some of the policy here. And I think I was speaking with Speaker Pelosi about it yesterday. And she said there was, we're getting through it, right? So I'm hopeful that we're going to get there. I have learned that in this business, you do not say it's going to happen until you actually see text and at this point, still a tweet from the president, right? But the stakes of not doing so are still so unbelievably inconceivable that I think it's hard to think that Congress goes away without nothing, or without anything.
So, a question from Michael Alexander, who, as you know, is the president of LaSalle College. What are your thoughts about the appointments Biden has made so far and the tension those appointments may be creating between progressives and centrists?
Mr. President, great to be with you, as always. Look, I think the people that the president has appointed, the individuals so far that he has named, are extremely competent. They're good folks. I've gotten a chance to know many of them, obviously not all, but many of them. And they're good, competent people that believe in science and evidence and want our government to function and want it to serve our people, right? So I think that's actually a big plus from where we have been. I think that, with regards to kind of the ideology of any single set of the individuals at this point, one, the cabinet's not set yet. They've still got an awful lot of positions to fill. I think you're seeing the president-elects try to the broad platform that he was given, but the challenges of trying to govern from a big tent kind of ideology where you're going to have Republicans that voted for the president, you're going to have the president-elect, you're going to have left of center Democrats, you're going to have strong progressives that voted for him. And so the challenge on that is everybody can find something to pick, to be bothered about by anybody you pick. And you're hearing a fair amount of that. I would say on the whole, that was largely expected, right? There wasn't going to be a whole lot of folks that everyone was going to say, hey, great pick, just because it's awfully hard to try to sit there and say for every person, you're not going to, not everybody's going to be able to span all of those political ideologies over the complexity of the purview of government as a whole. Hard to argue with the competency of those individuals or the dedication to their country. And I think there's, I think, Greg, the last thing I'd say here is, I think a lot of the policy change for the next couple of years is going to come out of the White House, right? It's going to come out of executive action because Congress is so divided. It's such a narrow majority for Speaker Pelosi in the House. And even if Democrats were to win both seats in Georgia, which is hard, but even if so, it's 50-50, and we Democrats have the majority with a tie-breaking vote from the vice president. That tie-breaking vote is only cast if all 50 people are there and voting, right? So, that's another question, right? Of if you're trying to do this in the midst of a global pandemic and people are sick or can't be there, or somebody gets, some other medical condition, and people can't be there, all of a sudden the contours of that balance of power changes, quickly. So it's just going to be, it's a hard environment to legislate in, which means much of that change is going to come from executive action and the vision of some of these individuals and that the cabinet, that the president selected for the cabinet and some of the positions below. I think what's strong there so far is the level of competence that of the individuals that he's selected.
So in addition to the questions about whether there's enough centrists or progressives, there's a lot of discussion about whether the cabinet and appointees in general reflect America and the diversity of America. I don't think, and I could be mistaken, there are any redheads yet appointed.
I've been making that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely. There needs to be more gingers represented. Federal government, absolutely.
So let's talk about it. What do you want to do next? What are you thinking about? I'm sure you're not going to tell us if you have an offer on the table, but tell us what feels right. What's interesting to you?
So one of the challenges is there's a fair amount that's interesting. I guess the issue here, Greg, almost from a philosophical level, is people say, okay, well, what do you want to do? The answer to that is actually pretty easy. I wanted to be a senator, right? That just didn't work out. So then they say, okay, well, what else do you want to do? Well, fair and good question and the right question. It just takes a little while to figure out, well, what's the next thing? Most folks still struggle with what do you want to do? Then trying to figure out, well, what's the next thing you want to do? It takes a little time. There's parts of this job that I have really enjoyed. There's parts of this job that I think are really important and meaningful, and that I have found extremely fulfilling. Diving into some of the issues around access to healthcare, particularly on mental health care, and the enormity of the crisis that we were confronting in our mental health care system before COVID hit, and the absolute devastation that COVID is going to mean, and the mental health impacts are long-term mental health impacts are going to be on our system. Issues around healthcare disparities and disparate, not just access, but disparities around our Commonwealth and our country. Issues around our economy, and I think the erosion of economic power for American workers, which I think, as you know, I've done a fair amount of work on. So I'll miss that. I'd love to have a opportunity, or perhaps more likely a series of opportunities that allow me to kind of stay active on those in some form or another. I don't know. I think it's hard to find one job that is just going to be able to say, okay, here's the way to go stay active on and to do these 3 or 4 different things that you want to do. The job that I know that does that is kind of the one that I got, or the one that I was hoping to get. Short of that, I think there's a chance, at least in the short term, that it ends up being a combination of things. Some involvement with some local and national nonprofits on the causes that I really do care about. perhaps some engagement with some local companies we'll see that are kind of centered on those issues as well. And I have no expectation whatsoever of getting involved in another race for office anytime soon. But there's some of these issues that I do care about that I think still need that systemic change. So trying to figure out the right way to kind of add my voice there where I think it can be meaningful and perhaps have an impact, and working through some challenges there. So we'll see. A lot of opportunities out there, but I got to figure that out soon. And you know, as my wife has pointed out, we also need health insurance. So
somebody asked if you've thought about teaching. Have you thought about writing a book?
Teaching, yes, a bit. Giving that some thought. Writing a book, a little bit less. Probably some concern as to what one would I'd say and two if anybody would read it at this point. You know, I think more so for me, the opportunity to kind of get engaged. Greg, part of what I really am looking forward to is I have basically lived a life on the road in one form or another for the past 10 years. And, you know, that's under most circumstances close to, if not more than 100 flights a year. And never in one place for longer than 3 or 4 days at a time. And so I'm very much looking forward to spending some more time with a young family, one, but two, getting involved in some of the local organizations and initiatives here and some of the local causes here that I think, well, Massachusetts, I'm incredibly proud of the way that our state's tried to confront some of these challenges that we still need to do an awful lot better. We've got, as you all know, at least prior to COVID, it's the third most gentrified city in the nation with the worst commute in the country because the people that work in the city of Boston can't afford to live there. We're seeing enormous amount of housing pressure, as you guys all know, in the suburbs, western suburbs, but all suburbs of Boston. You've seen an enormous amount of growth. I mean, you've been literally, this chamber has been leading that policy discussion around this, you know, whether it's been that Newton-Needham line. And some of the work that we've done with the chamber on this. And while some of that, we'll see what the consequence of COVID means for some of those businesses long-term and some of that infrastructure long-term, you know, there's some changes that need to be made, I think, at a policy level in Massachusetts as well, whether that's affordable childcare, whether that's, you know, investments in infrastructure, which again, I think has to be rethought of at the moment. So finding ways to actually dig my hands into some of these issues that I could only kind of do at a cursory level before, either because you legally couldn't, or you just didn't have the time, or it wasn't appropriate to get involved, for a member of Congress get involved with one specific issue here. I'm looking forward to kind of diving in a little bit deeper.
So Barney Frank once said to me that he liked being a congressman because he had a short attention span. And I took that to mean that he could focus on a lot of things, and every day, every hour, there was something new. Does the idea that if you go down one path and have to abandon or neglect other paths that you've been fighting for all this time kind of bother you, like in terms of make that a hard choice?
Yeah, look, I think one of the great privileges of this job, my dad had told me at one point, he said, being a member of Congress, if you're intellectually curious, is like the world's greatest graduate school, because you get hit with literally 1,000 different issues every single day. And you can call up almost any expert in the country, and most of them will take your phone call and tell them what you think they're smart about, right? You can call up a professor from somewhere and say, hey, I heard you're smart about this, tell me about it. Mm-hmm. And whether that's, you know, transportation routes or drug pricing or Mars exploration or whatever else, like most of them will teach you about it. And so that part of the job is fascinating, right? No question. And yeah, I will miss that part of it. The other frustration with it, though, is if you're intellectually curious, you get essentially the Cliff Notes version or the first 2 paragraphs on Wikipedia from those topics, and then you have to go to the next one because you just don't have the time to actually kind of start to wade into the details, the nuances of it. get asked all the time, I currently probably get to read a couple of books a year. That's it. I've got 2 young kids. I don't, I'm on the road all the time. I'm not exactly, I don't get a whole lot of sleep as is. And there hasn't been a whole lot of excess time to sit down and do a lot of in-depth reading, right? If you're reading stuff, it's quick. So I'm looking forward to, on some of these issues that I really do care about, spending some more time and actually diving into them. And I think, Greg, one of the big ones here that I still don't think we've gotten right is the last one that I referenced here, but is are kind of the ways in which a Democratic Party, but a country, is wrestling with this massive cultural and economic change that we're going through. There's a question in the chat about Trumpism.
Yep.
I don't think that gets defeated anytime soon, right? And if you think that's a problem elsewhere, when Bush and Cheney ran, Bush and Cheney won 19% of the vote in Fall River, Massachusetts, when they were on the ticket. Donald Trump just won 43% of the vote in Fall River. Charlie Baker, who's the most popular governor in the country by many measures, Donald Trump won more votes than Charlie Baker did in his first election. So, and again, there's a difference in turnout between presidential and gubernatorial elections, true. But I point out the fact that for folks that think that this is a problem of, the post-industrial Midwest, or this is a problem throughout the South, or this is something that, doesn't happen here, it does. And not every supporter of and voter of the president, I think, can be defined by an ist or an ism, right? And part of this comes back to the way in which a Democratic Party is now often, and there's been some writing on this of late, but is becoming increasingly the party of the educated and communities of color. Although we obviously saw some gains that the President Trump made with both Hispanics and African Americans in this last election. And so I think there's an awful lot of work that that a Democratic Party has to dive into on this, about kind of the policies that we're putting forth, who they speak to, who they speak for, and are they actually addressing the individuals, their causes and concerns that we think they are. And I think the answer to that is they're not. I've been wrestling with some thoughts on that for a while. I've kind of developed some pieces on it that I've rolled out, but it's certainly something that I was looking forward to engaging on, and what I hope to be my continued perch in government, but would like to give some thinking to that, even now that I'm going to be outside of it.
Great. All right, I think I have 2 more questions for you.
Yeah.
First one, should politicians and celebrities get the vaccine early to set a good example, or is that just cutting the line?
I think, look, I think the short answer there is it depends, right? I think you can make a pretty good argument for the president. Obviously, the people in line of succession for the presidency, we want them safe and healthy. For the former presidents to get it and to show it for like that, I think that's fine. I would have a hard time saying, hey, if you're an A-list actor, you qualify, right? I think there's some parameters we want to put forth on that, and I think for other politicians, just because you're elected in office, I can tell you this as somebody who's currently in office, but not for all that long, you're not quite as important as you might think you are. So for folks that, have national security concerns or in line of succession, I think that's one thing. For, everybody else, I think that should be based off of, whether you fall into the other categories of being at risk and of need.
Great, thank you. And so finally, and I ask this question a lot because I'm always fascinated by the answer, and I don't think I've asked it to you in the 8 or 9 years we've known each other, but we'll try. If you could go back at any point into history of the world, just observe it, not to change it, not to be able to say, hey, don't do that, whatever it is, just to watch what it happened. What would you want to go back and see?
The history of the world, Greg? Yeah. I mean, not quite the history, maybe it's the history of the world. The Big Bang, I guess, to figure out what actually happened would be the first.
Actually want to, yeah.
I mean, I don't know if I guess physically that's not possible, but I mean,
right.
How you get something out of nothing is impressive to me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to figure out how that happened. Other than that, yeah, you know, I think the moment that we are, look, obviously the founding of our country would be fascinating, and the time thereafter, the early years of it. But I think, kind of speaking a bit episodically here, our country, our planet is in the midst of a massive economic, cultural, and here in the United States, demographic transition. And you're seeing the political parties and the political institutions convulse a bit or crack a bit under the weight of that transition. And obviously change is always constant, but the rate of change at the moment is faster than many of our institutions are able to keep pace with, and our political system hasn't, right? Some of these reforms, campaign finance reform, gerrymandering, ending the filibuster, and a number of others would make the system work a lot better. And we haven't been able to, the structure of that system is preventing that change from taking place. But I would be curious if you could personally actually observe it and live through those other times of transition, to try to figure out what was it that actually was effective at getting us through it. And obviously, you know, leadership at the highest levels matters. I don't think anybody doubts that FDR or Abe Lincoln were consequential for the outcomes and the success of our nation. But it's got to be more than just that. And so what else is it, and what else does this country need to do at the moment to make sure that we are able to prove to our fellow citizens that in fact our best days are in front of us, but that's going to take, in order to address the challenges that we confront, whether that is massive income inequality or climate change and some of these other structural barriers, you need everybody to make a contribution. And then you need a system that allows for that contribution to be made. And you need to empower a population to be able to go out there and achieve it. And I think that's the big challenge at the moment, is we have structures that prevent people from making that contribution, and that accentuate the type of contribution that can be made and who can make it. And that distortion is what has plagued our country for a long time, but is coming to a head again now.
Great answer, and a different answer than anyone has ever given before. So
no one gave the Big Bang? I'm shocked.
No one has picked the Big Bang before.
What's the most popular one? Which one did I miss?
I don't know there's a most popular one, but it's actually been fascinating. I probably should put them in a book sometime, or publish them somewhere. There's some great answers there. Thank you so much for today, for this hour, for your thoughtfulness, for your leadership, for being here, for the chamber, for your friendship. We're really grateful for all of it, and look forward to what's next, and having you as our neighbor.
Greg, it has been my, as I said before, my honor. And I've been privileged to be able to have this job, and to be able to fight for you and your members, the people represented here on this forum in Washington. I've given it everything I've got. I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. I look forward to trying to find other ways to continue to serve and make that contribution. And again, as I said, if there's ways that I can be of service to you or any of your members, I certainly hope you'll let me know. And who knows, maybe I'll be a member of the new Needham Chamber sometime soon.
That's great. And my mom is watching. It's the first time she's ever watched a chamber event, so if you could just say hello to her.
Mrs. Reibman, how are you? It is a pleasure. Absolutely.
Congressman, thank you so much. We look forward to everything, and we'll be in touch. And thanks everybody for watching, to ALL for sponsoring, along with the BID Needham and Century Bank. Again, thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, my friend. Be well, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you, too.